For decades, millions of Americans shared the exact same evening ritual. They would sit down for a pleasant, comfortable half hour, relying entirely on trusted establishment figures like Walter Cronkite to tell them what happened in the world that day. But the big three networks, ABC, CBS, and NBC, kept this window narrow. Minus commercials, viewers received exactly 22 minutes of daily coverage. The networks believed this was the absolute limit of the public's appetite for information. Yet the audience's behavior told a different story. During national traumas, like the 4 days following John F. Kennedy's assassination, life in the United States stopped. Over 100 million people stayed glued to their screens, watching the funeral procession unfold live, minute by minute. Despite this hunger to witness history as it happened, the networks refused to expand daily coverage. To the executives, the news division was a way of paying a debt television owed to society, a mandatory civic tax rather than a profit center worth developing. Even if an independent broadcaster wanted to challenge the big three, they would hit a massive hidden wall. In the 1970s, broadcasting a national signal required leasing long-distance telephone lines from AT&T. The big three secured massive, exclusive discounts, paying a rate that slashed costs by 90%. Anyone else renting those lines paid on a per-mile, per-hour basis. 3 hours of transmission for a newcomer cost more than a full day for the networks. Beyond the infrastructure, the networks maintained extravagant spending habits. They paid newsmen double or triple the salary of newspaper reporters and allowed crews to travel first class around the world, making the business too expensive for outsiders to enter. Building a competing national news operation required a direct assault on a fortified infrastructure specifically designed to prevent independent competition. In 1978, a Georgia businessman named Ted Turner decided he was going to build a 24-hour news channel. Turner had no background in journalism. His father had been a billboard salesman, and Ted had built a conglomerate on top of that family business. When rumors of the news channel reached his Atlanta staff, panic set in. An anonymous note appeared on Turner's desk, pleading with him not to do it, warning that a news operation of this magnitude would sink the whole company. Turner ignored the warning. Since he couldn't afford to poach elite network stars, he recruited industry misfits, mavericks and loners who had spent years working outside the big three and were eager to challenge their control. This group of motivated mavericks acted as a scrappy insurgency. They were perfectly positioned to attack an establishment they viewed as smug and self-satisfied. This chart highlights the massive financial gap between the players. While a major network like CBS spent up to $150 million a year on news, CNN planned to launch with just $30 million, a fourth of the budget. To distribute their feed, they bypassed the AT&T landline monopoly. Instead of relying on terrestrial cables, they utilized the new frontier of domestic satellites to beam their signal directly to local cable systems across the country. But even with cheaper distribution, a logical problem remained. How do you physically generate enough credible information to fill 24 unbroken hours? Turner's team mapped the network like a physical magazine. They broke the day into dedicated blocks, half an hour for news, half an hour for sports, and segments for features and business. They also created an open newsroom concept. By sitting the anchors right in the middle of a bustling news pit, they demystified the process and used the natural background activity of working journalists to keep the screen visually active all day. By combining extreme budget discipline, satellite transmission, and a modular architecture borrowed from print, Turner's team created the blueprint needed to bypass the network gatekeepers. As launch day arrived on June 1, 1980, the television establishment was openly skeptical. Critics dismissed the project, mocking it as chicken noodle news. And on the exact day they needed to prove that 24-hour news was necessary, the world was completely quiet. Mount St. Helens was dormant, riots had ended, and even the Middle East was momentarily peaceful. Producers scrambled to find enough events to cover, terrified that the naysayers were right and that there simply wasn't enough news to sustain a network. It was the ultimate stress test for Turner's philosophy. He had built a system for a crisis, and now his team had to find a way to make a quiet Sunday morning feel like history. The quiet ended shortly after 6 p.m. A breaking story came in, an attempted shooting involving New York Yankees star Reggie Jackson. At that moment, CNN was in its very first commercial break. Hearing the news, Turner made a decisive choice. He ordered the control room to instantly cut the ads and go live with the story. For the networks, ads were the priority. News stayed in its 22-minute window. By cutting a paid spot, CNN proved its founding principle. The news came first, and the live flow of information would not bow down to advertisers. CNN had successfully beamed a breaking story live before any other network could react. It was the first proof of concept for a news operation that didn't just summarize the day, but lived alongside it.